The language learner at 70. Why the brain never stops adapting. Have you ever heard someone say, "I'm too old to learn that now"? Maybe it was about playing guitar, starting a new sport, or tackling a new language. Society often whispers this message. After a certain age, your brain is set in stone. But what if that's completely false? What if your brain is more like a muscle, capable of growing, reshaping, and surprising you at any age? This is the story of George, a retired mechanic who at the age of 70 decided to learn Spanish. Not only did he succeed, but in doing so he unlocked something much bigger, proof that the human brain never stops adapting. Hook, picture this. George, a grandfather with silver hair and a weathered face, sitting in a bustling cafe in Mexico City. Around him, locals chat in rapid Spanish. A waiter approaches, pen ready, and then, without hesitation, George smiles and says in clear Spanish, "Un café con leche, por favor. ¿Y también puede recomendarme algo típico de aquí?" The waiter grins. The people at the next table turn their heads. George beams. Why? Because just 5 years earlier, he could barely manage hola. Most of his friends told him, "You're too old for this. You'll never keep up. Learning a new language at 70. Impossible." But George didn't just learn Spanish. He rewired his brain, and in the process helped bust one of the biggest myths about aging, that old dogs can't learn new tricks. Life before Spanish, George spent most of his life working with his hands. As a mechanic, he loved fixing engines, solving problems with tools, and hearing the hum of a car roar back to life. He wasn't a scholar, he wasn't a language guy. In fact, in high school, George barely scraped through French class. He still laughed about how he once said, "Je suis une pomme, I am an apple," and the teacher never let him live it down. But after retiring, George found himself with time. Too much time. His wife had passed away, his kids were busy with their own lives, and the days felt long and empty. One afternoon, while video chatting with his granddaughter, she told him about her upcoming semester abroad in Spain. "Grandpa, you should come visit me, but you'll need to know some Spanish." Something clicked. For the first time in years, George felt a spark. The first step, George downloaded a free language app on his old tablet. At first, it was humbling. He mixed up perro, dog, and perro, but he kept saying adios when he meant hola. But the funny thing was, he enjoyed it. Each time, the app congratulated him with a cheerful, "Muy bien." He felt like a kid again, earning gold stars. At first, he studied for just 10 minutes a day, then 20. Soon, he found himself looking forward to his daily Spanish session. It wasn't just about words, it was about purpose. What was happening in his brain? Here's where the magic of neuroplasticity comes in. For decades, scientists believed that after childhood, the brain lost its ability to change. But modern neuroscience has flipped that idea upside down. Studies using MRI scans show that adult learners actually grow new neural connections when they practice new skills. When George repeated Spanish phrases, his brain was strengthening synapses, the connections between neurons, activating the hippocampus, the memory center, to encode new vocabulary, building white matter pathways like highways to speed up communication. At first, these connections were weak, like fragile dirt trails in the forest. But the more George practiced, the more those trails turned into solid roads and eventually highways. Small wins, big confidence. George's first real test came when he visited a Mexican restaurant in his hometown. Nervously, he greeted the waiter. "Buenas tardes. Me gustaría tacos, por favor." It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The waiter smiled and replied in Spanish. George understood maybe half of it, but it was enough. He left the restaurant floating. That small victory lit a fire. He realized that his brain wasn't betraying him with age. It was cooperating. Slowly, yes, but surely. Beyond apps encouraged, George signed up for a community Spanish class. On the first day, he walked in and noticed something. Most of the students were in their 20s. A few were even teenagers. He felt out of place, like a grandfather who wandered into the wrong room. But then the teacher, a lively woman from Colombia, said something that changed everything. "Languages are for everyone. Your brain doesn't care about your age, it cares about practice." George relaxed. He sat down, opened his notebook, and began again. The class became a highlight of his week. He made mistakes, sure. He rolled his R's, awkwardly confused tenses, and sometimes froze mid-sentence. But he also laughed, made friends, and discovered that learning wasn't just about the brain, it was about connection. The science of bilingual brains. What George didn't know at first was that learning a new language offers unique benefits to the aging brain. Grey matter growth. MRI studies show that bilingual people have denser grey matter in regions linked to memory and attention. Delay of dementia. Research suggests bilingualism can delay Alzheimer's symptoms by up to 4 to 5 years. Cognitive flexibility. Switching between languages strengthens the brain's ability to multitask and adapt. In other words, George wasn't just learning Spanish, he was giving his brain a workout, protecting it for years to come. The trip that changed everything. After 2 years of steady practice, George boarded a plane to Spain to visit his granddaughter. The moment he landed, he felt both nervous and excited. Signs, conversations, menus, all in Spanish. This was the ultimate test. On the first night, his granddaughter took him to a local tapas bar. The waiter came by, rattling off specials in Spanish. George took a deep breath and replied confidently, "Traiga unas patatas bravas y una copa de vino tinto, por favor." His granddaughter's jaw dropped. The waiter grinned. George laughed like a boy who just won a prize. For the rest of the trip, George navigated markets, ordered food, asked for directions, all in Spanish. He wasn't flawless, but he was functional. And for him, that was victory. What George learned, when he returned home, George shared his story at his community center. People asked him, wasn't it hard? Wasn't it too late to start? George just smiled and said, it was hard. But too late? No. My brain may be 70 years old, but it learns like a 7-year-old if I give it the chance. What this means for you, George's journey proves a powerful truth. You're never too old to learn. The brain remains plastic, capable of rewiring throughout your life. Every new skill you take on is exercise for your brain, strengthening its resilience and vitality. Whether it's a language, an instrument, or a hobby, the act of learning itself is medicine. So if you've been holding back, telling yourself, I'm too old for that, remember, George. Remember that your brain is waiting for you to give it a reason to grow. Closing in CTA the next time you doubt yourself. Imagine George in that Spanish cafe, ordering with confidence, proving that the brain doesn't have an expiration date. And if his story inspired you, imagine how many more are out there. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Powered by the science of neuroplasticity, don't miss them. Hit subscribe, join our community, and keep discovering just how adaptable your brain really is.